Coming up on this episode of Booked on Rock, drinking from the blood of gods. It's metal, mayhem, and wine with author Stacy Buchanan next.
We're totally booked.
Rock and roll!
Well, I think I'll leave you to your reading.
Little Hand says it's time to rock and roll.
Rock and roller!
We are totally booked.
Welcome back to Booked on Rock, the podcast for those about to read and rock. This episode's guest is Stacy Buchanan. He's the author of Blood of Gods, Metal, Mayhem, Wine. Stacy, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
The promo calls this book a thunderous tribute to the unlikely harmony between two seemingly distant worlds, heavy metal and wine. Tell us about the journey that led to this book. You grew up on hard rock, you worked in the business for a while, but burnout led you back home, and then came an interesting moment that changed everything for you. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I originally am from a really small town called Walla Walla, Washington. And it's funny because a lot of people know Walla Walla just because it's this funny, like an onomatopoeia where it just sounds like a goofy thing you'd hear from Looney Tunes or something. But, you know, I really just kind of, like a lot of folks, started to get interested in music from friends and family at an early age. And I had a couple uncles that were proud soldiers in the KISS Army. And they were like younger uncles, a little more cool because they were younger, you know, more rebellious party animals. You'd see them pretty much straight ripped out of the movie Dazed and Confused. That's like their bread and butter. We're just wild. So kind of coming from that, where it's like hard rock and KISS all the time, that kind of set me on my way a little bit, or at least gave me a, predisposition to that kind of lifestyle and those kinds of bands. I started freelance writing in high school just because I had kind of a little bit of a knack for writing. And it wasn't too dissimilar actually from, I'm sure you're familiar with it because it's like one of those classics, but Almost Famous, Cameron Crowe, where, he was quite a bit younger than me, though. I think he was like 15 or 16 when he was doing stuff with Rolling Stone. But I was, I would say probably around 19 when me and a really good friend, we had, kind of developed some relationships through our connections in music and writing, and we said, hey, we just graduated high school, we got to swing for the fences and do something crazy and go wild. And we wound up joining Ozfest that year. That was 2000, and that was when Pantera was still Pantera. The members are still alive. There was Queens of the Stone Age, Ozzy Osbourne, and it was just like a wild time. We didn't even think it would happen. We thought they would pat us on the head and say, oh, good effort. Nice try, but no thanks. And they wound up saying, hey, this is great. So we wound up kind of being sponsor representatives for like New Line Cinema, FYE, Hot Topic. And I think there might've been another one. And that really kind of set us on that fast track. I did it the following year for Alternative Press Magazine, which is a publication I wrote for, as well as Thrasher, coming from skateboarding and DIY, hardcore, punk, metal, all of it. That was in my wheelhouse for sure. From there, I was offered a job. I went down to LA, worked for Century Media Records. They did a lot of metal bands, but they were also starting to expand a little bit. Worked there for a few years. And then when I asked for promotion, I was actually presented this crazy idea, and I took it, which was to move over to Germany. So I worked out of their German office for a couple years. And then, as you probably are aware, wildly different as far as culture and as far as music and concerts and all those things are kind of like embraced and just like just how it's sort of treated, I guess you could say. But the real crossroads for me that kind of ties into your question was, after working as a freelance writer, and you feel like you're really promoting bands, you're waving the flag high, you're like, you got to check this out, or you're just feeling like you're actually being a positive, helpful force for some of these musicians, to then working on the other side of the coin, which is like you're in the business side now, and that's really like, yeah, we're having fun and it's wild, but also we need to sell records, and I need bands to tour all the time, and I need, and it was just like really tough when you are in this style of music, just to hear these sad old sob stories of starving artists, and people aren't really making, it's not all glamorous and money raining from the sky. So I was like, what, like I kind of miss it when it was more of a fan thing, more of a I don't know, more of a creative pursuit for me. And so I decided to come back to my home, Walla Walla. And when I returned, it had definitely transformed in my absence. I was gone from like 99. I returned just about 8 years later, by the beginning of 2007. And it went from 13 wineries in this small, sleepy town, literally like tumbleweed going across Main Street, to 113 wineries. So all of a sudden it turned into this really cool little hub, but it was a best kept secret because it's so remotely geographically isolated that it enriched the town culturally, personality, along with wine, there's great food and art and restaurants and things. And so I was really kind of taken aback at first, but then I was like, oh, this is actually neat to see it sort of transformed and enriched. Um, but the impetus for Blood of Gods was I started to hear some of these funny comparisons, like in the wine industry, you hear some of these winemakers referred to as like a rock star winemaker, and I'm like, what? That doesn't make. And like, you're not a rock star. I know rock stars, and you're like an old rich white dude with a monocle. Like that's not rock star. Like that's not cool at all. Kind of ruffle my feathers. And then you start to hear other things that were like kind of funny or things that were startlingly accurate, where you'd hear some complaints about trends in one and trends in the other, reviews, critics, publications, or even working with distributors, all these kinds of things. There was almost like this one-to-one correlation. And at first, it might have just been, oh, that's a neat coincidence, but it kept coming wave after wave of these like instances and anecdotes of like, that's just like it is in the music industry. That's kind of funny. Or that behavior is something I've seen also when I was working for a record label, and on and on. So Blood of God started as me just taking the piss out of it and just kind of being funny and poking holes through it and saying, trying to have a sense of humor. I didn't want to be like a curmudgeon. I was just like, oh, this is funny. Because on the surface, I mean, and this, like, not everyone that's into metal is like a knuckle dragging denim leather bullet belts and spikes, and the other side of that's true too. Like, not all wine drinkers or people that are into wine are like old rich white dudes wearing a monocle or something. And I think once you get past that artifice, just that aesthetic thing, they're both really complete obsessives. Like they're super fans. They have encyclopedic tendencies. They're collectors. They really like to nerd out about where was this produced or who produced this, or, oh, remember that one, album or the sophomore album. It's just like vintages of wine. So it kind of has a lot of interchangeable components, which I thought was really neat because it kind of helped you understand the other when you're using some of the language of the counterpart, where you're like, oh, I didn't think of it that way. And it just kind of seemed to grow from there, where people were like, oh, this kind of took the tension out of the room a little bit, or that elitism. Like you're not cool enough, or like if it's someone's day one, they'd have an old head kind of browbeating them to see, if they were worthy of whatever, of admission. And so that always, you know, troubled me because, I'm a huge metalhead, and, you have people that are so territorial about it and so competitive about it. Or they just like to show off their knowledge. And, that's not, if you love metal so much, you got to really give back to it. You can't keep it exclusive. You're going to suffocate it. It needs oxygen, it needs new blood. And so like, give it some air to breathe. And I kind of feel like that's sort of the direction Blood of Gods has gone since then, is kind of advocating like, hey, don't forget, this should be fun. We should celebrate this. It's supposed to be enjoyable. It's not just like a measuring contest. Like, hey, check out my vocabulary, or look at my collection, or, that's not it. You're missing the point.
The book features original essays, interviews, full-color artwork, amazing artwork, and wine recommendations from a lineup of iconoclasts, vintners, and metalheads. Tell us who you spoke to for this book. I know Maynard James Keenan is the big one. He's from Tool, Perfect Circle, Pussifer, he's in the book. Who else is in the book?
I'm thinking off the top of my head, the ones that sort of jumped out to me that are in the musical realm is Greg Anderson. He plays in this band called Sun, but he's also maybe as well known for he's the head of Southern Lord Records. They do more like sludgy, southern doomy stuff, avant-garde kind of stuff. In the past, there's also been like Cradle of Filth. Have an interview with Danny. He was the vocalist for Cradle of Filth in there. And in the past, there's been others too, such as like Paul Mazurkowitz from Cannibal Corpse. He's their drummer. I'm trying to think of some of the more recent ones. Brian Slagle, he founded Metal Blade, and he was Super cool guy, super nice. I feel like everyone's just been really magnanimous and generous with their time because I think they know, and this again, not to beat a dead horse, but it's like they understand when you're a fan, that it means a lot to have someone help you out or give you a leg up or to just extend the olive branch. When it comes to pursuing that passion, that thing that you're into. Yeah, it's been just so humbling in so many ways.
Astrology is also part of this book. This is really cool. We learn which wine is best for us based on our sign, thanks to Emily Dunaway Henrik. So tell us about Emily. Also, we should give a shout out to the artist Colin Estrada, who he puts together a chalice for each sign in the book.
Yeah, so what we did, and this is where it gets like fun because it gets kind of geeky for me, is like, if you're into wine, this is probably nothing new, but if you're just kind of the layperson, like wine has a whole rainbow of different types of wine, different styles of wine, different types of grapes, and there's some biodynamic producers, meaning they work under the teachings of Steiner, who kind of really believed in having this closed loop with nature, where you're not killing nature, you're collaborating with nature, you're not stealing anything from nature, you're using nature's forces to kind of help you. And this could be anything, growing grapes, or it could be growing vegetables in your garden. And biodynamics, one of the things that's kind of fun with it is it actually does work with the celestial calendar. So when there's like full moons versus when there's other events, and this is where it tapers off for me into winemaker territory. So astrology does play a role in winemaking if you go to that degree of it, where you're really dialed into that specificity of working with nature. So Emily, she really is kind of a unicorn for me because she's super into wine. She's really into heavy, crazy tunes. And she's actually come to, I do an annual event every year called the Merrymaking. It's here in Walla Walla. She's been a couple times now. She's a total trooper coming over from North Carolina. But the cherry on top is, yeah, she's way into astrology. So she's able to really know what these different signs are. And it's almost like a synesthesia thing where she knows, like, this wine is, a color, or this wine has a frequency or a vibration. It kind of feels like this is the astrology sign that it aligns the most with, and she would say why. So it's kind of fun. It's also one of those pseudoscience things where it's like, if you have a sense of humor and you have an open mind, you'll have fun with it. If you're dogmatic and you're trying to be the fun police, then you might as well just keep flipping pages.
Booked on Rock Podcast. We'll be back after this.
Short pause. Hold your breath for the dynamic duo.
There's also an interesting piece in the book written by Will Farley. It's titled Metal Moments in Wine, Myth, History, and Practice. The first entry is on the birth of Dionysus, god of wine and ritual madness. This is really cool. Talk about this chapter.
Will's a writer, and he works in food and beverage and hospitality in New York, and he's contributed a couple times. And what I've really appreciated about him is he is that bridge between facts and history, and he presents it in a way that just sounds almost hyperbolic, but it's all true. I mean, you don't have to exaggerate some of these things. So truth being stranger than fiction, he's really just saying, here's some of these myths and legends that have persisted in time. Some of them are truly just myths, but then there are real ones where you talk about thousands of years ago, how people would, make wine, and sometimes they would use bones and different things in the process, and it became a bit more occult or a bit more ritualistic. So it's fun because he gives you essentially, I think it's like 4 or 5 of these, deep dives into history about when in wine's past has it really shown you how metal it can be and how brutal or crazy or just esoteric. So yeah, he's awesome. Dionysus, the god of wine, is always kind of the one of the more referenced folks, but I love that there's just a lot of like natural pagan things that are baked into it, where it's just like the seasons, and it's just like ritual. It's just like in anything where you talk about harvest and things that happen in a cyclical nature in the year, and you just kind of really give a little special credence or reverence to those times when, hey, the field is fallow, or hey, we're going to harvest, and in making that a moment to say cheers. Let's like celebrate what nature's given us.
Maybe my favorite part of this book is the chapter titled Spells, Spirits, and Sips, a magical guide to wizards, witches, and wine. And they have all the famous wizards in this, like Gandalf and Merlin, Maleficent.
That's kind of a good example of like in this book, like I said at the beginning, it's kind of a greatest hits of like the publication to date, but also we wanted to give something to people that had followed it for a while. So there's new and unreleased material in there. And that's one of them, which is we had I think it was 4 or 5 master sommeliers contribute to these different wizards, witches, warlocks, like what wine are they drinking and why? And what's fun, if you're not aware, is master somms. It's the highest level of attainment in wine, where I think they just awarded a handful of others this distinction, but there's like approximately, let's say, 250 in the world that have been able to do this. And that's in the last 50 years. So in the last 50 years, only 250 people have been able to like do this thing. It's just so advanced. It's so off the charts. It's basically like having like an astronaut or some nuclear physicist or nuclear submarine captain like weigh in on my little fun rinky dink book or my zine. So I'm just like over the moon that they're like into it. But I think they also understand that this is for fun. This is for pure fandom. We want to enjoy this stuff. We basically got the tiger by the tail. We got the creme de la creme, like these people that operate at the highest level of wine to have fun, let their hair down, actually tell you, hey, what's Saruman drink? What's in his cup? Or like, what about, I forget who else, Gandalf, of course, he's in there. I think there's also Maleficent, Dumbledore, the Baba Yaga. What are those guys and gals drinking? But also more importantly, like, why is it them? And it kind of fits with their personality, let's just say. So if you read the book, you'll be like, oh, well, this is why. I think a couple of them made funny references unbeknownst to each other that like Gandalf was definitely down with smoking weed and
oh yes, I pulled that quote. That was actually from Andrew Myers. He says Gandalf is a straight up stoner, so I trust he's looking to get torn up and crash like a well-fed hobbit, but he's also a classy bitch.
And that's just like the reward for me in itself. It's like, oh man, it's like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of like a good analogy, like maybe in sports or something where it's like, you got this like MVP quarterback and he's going to give you the time of the day and just sort of like chew the fat with you about, oh yeah, let's have fun and, be goofy and creative. And I think a lot of people that read it, it just feels more real, or they can see that it's fun.
And there's a chapter, What's So Punk About Wine? Tell us about this chapter and what kind of responses you got.
I think the What's So Punk About Wine, the thing I like about it, you could make the case for is somewhat metal too, but I think the thing about punk is that it was the do-it-yourself mentality. Like anyone can do it. If where there's a will, there's a way. If you really like this thing, there's sort of that spirit of like, for me, punk is like questioning the status quo. It's challenging authority or challenging conventions. Punk rock to me is also like anyone can do this, not just like older people, not just white people, not just it's anyone can do this. And so I love that like some of the newer wineries, I should say, have that punkiness to them where they're like, we're gonna say who dares wins and we're gonna try this thing out and we're gonna like kind of shirk convention a little bit because we've always wanted to try wines that were made in this style or made in this way or using certain techniques. And so I loved when I was hearing more and more people, and that's why I had that section in the book there, how they've been doing things a little bit that have been edgy or frowned upon, and come to find out they were maybe on the bleeding edge of the next trend because they were the ones that stuck their neck out. And to me, that's like being punk, is when you're not looking for permission. You're kind of like seeking your own truth and your own way forward. So that was like awesome just to sort of see, like, I wasn't forcing a narrative, because sometimes in this book there's points where I'm like, oh, is this too heavy handed? Does it sound like I'm leading people? And that absolutely was not the case there, where people were over the moon to talk about what they took from punk and applied in the wine world in their experience. It was awesome.
Stacy Buchanan is the author of Blood of Gods, Metal, Mayhem, Wine. You spoke with Brian Slagle, we mentioned this earlier, the founder of the legendary label Metal Blade. His taste and talent for finding crucial heavy tunes also crosses over into an appreciation for wine. He talks about how he became a lover of wine thanks to a meeting with the band Loudness.
They ordered a few bottles worth over $500. Yes, they asked me to try them. So yeah, that sounds like that was one of those cool things where I feel like if people just suspend disbelief and they're like, all right, here's some wine, just try it. Like, I actually didn't make this wine. You're not going to hurt my feelings, like, and the price next to it also that he mentions that same thing, that can almost be a complete power of suggestion moment, where he's talking like, oh, here's a $500 bottle of wine. Then you're probably predisposed to thinking like, oh, this is good and I should like this and this is really tasty. Come to find out, as he mentions elsewhere in there, and this is like important for anyone that's hearing this, is like, trust your palate. Like, because I've had bottles of wine that are like $20, $25, $30 that are just like amazing, and I'm totally over the moon and totally happy, completely satisfied, and not left wanting at all. So it's definitely just like any art where, what is the value? This is all subjective anyway, if we're talking about a painting or we're talking about an album. And so I kind of love that, to tie this all up with a bow, the punk thing of it is too, is, challenging the status quo. And that's kind of like, I think one of those things that people think, oh, it's got to be expensive to be good. No, not really. So yeah, Brian kind of proves that point.
Booked on Rock Podcast. We'll be back after this.
Hey, I won't be long.
Hey guys, thanks so much for checking out the Booked on Rock Podcast. If you've just found the podcast, welcome. If you've been listening, thank you so much for your support. And make sure you tell a friend, a family member, share on social media, and let people know about Booked on Rock. And if you do like the podcast, make sure you subscribe, give a 5-star review wherever you listen to the Booked on Rock Podcast. We're on Amazon, Apple, iHeart, Spotify, Spreaker, TuneIn, and on YouTube Music. You can check out the full episodes on video, along with video highlights from episodes, on the Booked on Rock YouTube channel. Find it at Booked on Rock. Thanks again for listening. Now back to the show. You mentioned Maynard James Keenan. Let's go back to him again, because that was a big get for you. Talk about getting an interview with him for this book.
He was probably, I would say, like my my white whale, because he kind of is that perfect Venn diagram where it's like, all right, he's got one foot firmly in each camp, where wine and metal, or whatever you want to describe, or I don't want to be the genre police, but wine and heavy music, that's kind of his thing. And so interviewing him was a little intimidating, just because I knew that from talking to people that knew him or had interviewed him, because I think he's so, and I'm just kind of saying this out loud, unfiltered, but I think he's just really under a microscope so often, because he has so many diehard fans and so many obsessive fandom that they really are probably like punishing in a number of ways with their admiration. It's like geeking out about Tool, from the art to the music to its time signatures to all these little like details. I feel like it's probably what should I say, expected that he is a little bit more reserved, because he is so under that microscope. For me, interviewing him, though, the one advice I was told is like, actually just like keep it to wine. Like don't you don't even need to talk about music that much, because he's been doing that for like decades and decades at that point. And so we just talked about music and kind of geeked out. And one of the commonalities is he's in Arizona, which is very uncommon in the wine world. But I love that that's kind of on the bleeding edge of the wine world. Where I'm from in Walla Walla has got a lot of similarities. It's like a hot, arid, drier climate. So we can kind of speak a little bit of the same language, because we're kind of in that same climactic region as far as the ground, the minerals, the terroir, and that's kind of what he's dealing with. So we just talked about wine, and him and his wife, well, I'd say especially his wife, because that's kind of how it came together. I think she just admired the spirit of the publication. Like, oh, this is like fun. It's irreverent. It's got heart. It's also, it's funny, but it also has like a little bit of, I don't want it to be too academic or educational, but I do want it to have something that sticks. And I feel like if I was just a one-trick pony and I was just like The Onion or something, I love The Onion. It's like the satire is like hilarious, but then it's just becomes a one-dimensional thing, a one-trick pony. I'm like, oh, I want to have something that has some staying power where people are like, oh, I didn't know that.
There was an interesting question that you asked him about regarding the parallels between winemaking and metal music in terms of the region, the climate, the conditions. And his response was interesting. It's an intersection between art and nature with not just winemaking, but also making music.
Oh yeah, I think that's like that's so it's just good advice for any discipline or any craft, which is sort of like have a plan, but be flexible because at the end of the day, nature's got the last word. You know, you could have everything planned within an inch of its life and just like dialed in and perfect and precise. Guess what? A wildfire's coming through. Oh, shoot, there goes that. Or hey, there's, a hurricane or there's anything that, that's kind of I think where I don't know. I love that he talks about it because it's also the magic of it to me. It's like there is this like thing that's out of your control. You're just kind of like this shepherd that's sort of like pulling these ideas together and you have an idea and it's more of a direction. It's not like a place that you arrive at. And I think that's kind of at the heart of what he's talking about is like you're kind of co-creating, with Mother Nature. She's like, here's the colors you're gonna have for this vintage. And he's like, okay, well, this is the colors palette I'm gonna work with. And I like that because I think it gives you a perspective of being in a state of allowing, and you're not attached to the outcome or the expectations as much. It's just like the act of creating is really kind of a cool thing. And I think ego could get kind of conflated in that. So I think that's like he takes his ego out of it.
This book does break down the stereotypes, and one of them is that wine is just for white guys, right? And there's that chapter in the book that talks about some of the quote unquote badass women in wine that you spoke with. Talk about this chapter.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, men and women, they have the same agency over their senses, like, taste, smell, hearing, all that stuff. It's not like one gender is predisposed to, oh, they smell aromas and fragrances better than the other. Oh, they actually have a better palate than the other. Like, not at all. And if we're being completely honest with you, I would say women probably have better palates than men. And that's just me. And maybe that's like a spicy, quick, hot take for you. But I feel like what I want to show is that we're really just having these grapes from nature processed or, I don't even know if you want to say like manipulated because they're not manipulated, but it's essentially saying you're sort of like shepherding these through a natural process, which is where they break down. There is a cellular deterioration, that gives off alcohol because yeasts are consuming the sugars and yada yada. Not to get too sciencey, but how can one gender be better at just guiding that process along than the other? And it's a rhetorical question. I mean, of course, neither is better than the other. So I want to make sure that there's gender equity because if I'm really being honest and I am wanting this to be inclusive and equitable, then I do need to make sure that women have a place at the table too. I mean, we live in this really, not to get too political, but we live in a dystopian hellscape right now. And unfortunately, women are treated like second-class citizens, and that's garbage. Coming from punk and DIY, I was always that anyone's allowed here. The misfits, the black sheep, the outsiders, the marginalized, like those are my people. That's who I hang out with. That's who I want to hang out with. And, right now in the world, women are unfortunately, like I said, second class citizens. So it makes me a little bit feel like I need to, not be a crusader, but I just need to be a little bit of a reminder that we need to think about the team, and the team's everyone, when it comes to enjoying this stuff. And if you do like this, you need to wave the flag high and say, hey, we need new blood in here. We need fresh faces or it's going to die out. We need people from all kinds of walks of life. And so, yeah, the people, the badass women in wine that are there are essentially trailblazers. The ones that were, I mean, I'm talking about back in the day, which is probably even harder than it was now in such a male dominated industry, to go out of their comfort zone. And maybe it's not even a comfort zone thing. It's like they just had the bravery to push the dial or to say, hey, I want a spot at the table too. That whole article was penned by Emily Wines. I just have to pause because that's literally her last name. It sounds like, her fate was spelled out for her from whenever. But she's a master som. So again, that group of 250ish people in the world, she was actually their chair for I don't know how long, how many years, but she gets it, and and I mean the title of it is not a novelty because women shouldn't just be like a novelty or like a token, like, oh, we got a woman here, give us a gold star. It's like that should be normal, and so no one should be getting a gold star for doing something that's the bare minimum or something that's just should be the norm. So yeah, that definitely had to give some recognition. And that's awesome just to kind of like make sure that people know this. It's heavy metal, but it's weird if you look at like on my social media, it's like almost way more equitable than I would have thought. Like I think it's like 60% men, 40% women. And I was like, oh, it probably was only like 10 or 20%, of women would be like, oh, this is cool. It's like, guess what? It's like actually double that. And I just had my annual merrymaking event, and that was wild because there's so many men and women of all social strata you can imagine at the tasting event itself, but after party concert, even in the pit moving around, and you're like, wow, this is really cool just to see this many people that's so diverse. It's really cool.
The interview with Rune Wine's owner, James Callahan, another really interesting one. Rune Wines is an off-grid winery and tasting room in Arizona, and he likens discovering wine to a sci-fi story.
Yeah. He kind of like, if you're not familiar, Rune Wines is awesome. They're in that same stomping ground as Maynard James Keenan we were just talking about. So they're in Arizona, a very unlikely place. And he kind of has this really cool concept with his wine labels where each label is sort of like one panel of a comic book. So the story takes a really long time because we're talking multiple wines, multiple vintages, and you see kind of the story push along down the timeline. So his whole thing was, and I'm going to butcher it, but just for brevity's sake, it was about sort of how a celestial event where Venus vinifera, which is the science word for grapevines, was essentially like pollinated on this planet and throughout the cosmos, for all we know. And so it's grown here on planet Earth, and it kind of follows that whole storyline of like wizards and this plant that came here from who knows where in the cosmos, and has now been essentially like worked itself into every facet of humanity from cultures all over, from like Eastern Europe like Georgia to Australia and everywhere in between. So it's pretty cool to take a niche and go even deeper and geekier with it.
Booked on Rock Podcast will be back after this.
The future is now!
Find the Booked on Rock website at bookedonrock.com. There you can find all the back episodes of the show, the latest episode in video and audio, links to all of the platforms where you can listen to the podcast, plus all the social media platforms. We're on Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X. Also, check out the Booked on Rock blog, find your local independent bookstore, find out all the latest hot rock book releases, and before you go, check out the Booked on Rock online store. Pick up some Booked on Rock merch. It's all at bookedonrock.com. We also have the name generators in this book. This is cool. We have the death metal winery name generator, the wine horror name generator, too. How'd you come up with this?
That was actually from issue 1, so it was kind of fun to see that it had sort of like the staying power, I guess you could say. The very first one was the death metal winery name generator, and I'm going to bring it up on mine because I'm going to do yours for you. So what's your first initial and what's your last initial? I'm gonna like do this for you.
So first initial is E, last initial is S.
Okay, so your death metal winery name is, and I'm gonna say the last wine you drank was a Grenache because that was the last one I have, just so we can kind of like, just so we could like churn this thing out. And so your death metal winery name is gonna be Beastly Funeral Blood. So that sounds pretty brutal.
I love it.
Beastly Funeral Blood. That is the name of your death metal winery. So it's just meant to be like silly. That's even like we did something else where it was like during, or I think it was right when the pandemic got done, and it was like your weekend plan generator. So it's like, here's the last person you texted, and what was the last live concert you saw? Because the time pandemic when we couldn't socialize, you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't been to a concert in I don't know how long. Those kinds of things, just to kind of like, you have to laugh sometimes because this world is so chaotic.
There's also Wicked Wine term or brutal band name. I love this one. The font also is the Iron Maiden font.
Well, that's just kind of like to illustrate that, hey, some of this stuff, sounds brutal and it's actually like a wine term. So there's things like, I mean, some of these, because of, the nature of your show, people are going to be on it, but some wine people might not get a band name and some music people might not get a wine name. So when you hear things that are like Maceration, that sounds like a brutal death metal band. Or if you are doing, let's see, what was another one here? Like, well, Acid Bath. Acid Bath is, that could sound like a winemaking term, but even like Noble Rot, that's an actual wine term. Phylloxera, and these things, that's actually like a pest that can kill vines. Crusher Destemmer, Carbonized, oxidized, one of those is actually banned. One of those is actually a wine term. Soil Work, I think that maybe is one people have heard of. It's a Swedish band. But then you got like Volatile Acidity, which is like, that's actually just a wine term. So it's meant to be fun. There's like 17 of these where the idea, which is sort of implied but not really explicitly said, is like, oh, doesn't wine sound kind of brutal? Because some of these terms in it. And in the upcoming issue, not to like to spoil a surprise, but there's actually this term called necromass, which is the term essentially for the trillions and incomprehensible amount of the dead cells that are like microbial, they're like invisible, but you put trillions and trillions of them, that essentially is what soil is and what dirt is like this necromass, which essentially helps retain moisture for the plants. It kind of helps insulate them in a number of ways. So we have a soil scientist he goes really like fun, and he is essentially describing how these vines are sort of like this evil sorceress, and she's able to command these legions of cells and microbial entities. She will absorb them. And this is one of those truth is stranger than fiction things, because it's all true. It's all science, but she'll absorb microbes through her roots, actually pull them through her vascular system. They give her nutrients. She'll spit them out and actually give them like a little biochemical armor. And then they go do her bidding again and then come back to her. And it's just this crazy thing that scientists are finding when they're getting down to that really small microbial level, how roots talk to microbes, talk to fungus, talk to algae, and they're all that system that, isn't, I wouldn't say it's the last frontier, because I think a lot of people know about it, but we just don't know a lot about it and how those networks talk to each other and communicate and help each other.
All right, so let's finish with, because sadly we lost Ozzy Osbourne this week, so let's talk about that, because he is in the book here. We got a really cool illustration. There's a chapter called Metal Icons Pairing, and this is where you'll see a really cool drawing of Ozzy there, also with Lemmy. This is by Justin Moore, illustrations by Ryan Caskey.
Yeah, Justin Moore, he is the contributor that penned it, and he's one of the master somms. I think there's probably like about a dozen or so that I've worked with over the last 5 years. So the icons are Lemmy from Motorhead. You've got George Corpse Grinder Fisher from Cannibal Corpse, Ozzy, of course, and then Danny Filth from Cradle of Filth. And he kind of, based on their personality, based on their music, based on all that stuff, it's like, this is what I think they're drinking, and this is why I think this is what fits. For Ozzy, though, I mean, yeah, just hit me so hard, when he passed away recently. But Justin, he's kind of like your guide along the way. So he kind of decodes things. All this stuff sometimes can feel a little bit jargony, and so he kind of helps translate these ciphers. But so he says, though you may find the Godfather's likeness on a bargain bottle of blended California wine, I doubt the Prince of Darkness pops that cork. When dealing with years of overindulgence, one finds that less is more and quality is preferred to quantity. And he kind of goes on to talk about, Grand Cru Burgundy, which is like going to be Pinot Noir in his instance. He lists a certain area in particular that is like kind of like the creme de la creme, like the cream of the crop when it comes to Pinot Noir. But yeah, sometimes you can find a bottle like he mentions, like I think it was like for $100. But then sometimes you can find one if it's been aged for years or decades that could be in the thousands of dollars. Yeah, and I think I mentioned this before, we really started the interview, but in the preamble with, Ozzy is kind of like larger than life. And even though I was young, kind of starstruck at the time, it was almost more out of like respect. You don't want to meet your heroes. Kind of feels like it would like break the spell a little bit or something. At that time, I was 20 and Jack and Kelly were about 4 or 5 years younger than me, which when you're 20, someone that's like 15 or 16, that's like, it feels like a really big gap. When you're older, 4 or 5 years is like nothing. But since they were the closest to us in age, me and the team I was with at the time would pal around like all the time, like kids would summer camp, go to the mall. You just kind of be geeky, nerdy kids and hang out. And, I probably only actually interacted with Sharon maybe like a dozen or so times, but I really love that she had that sweetness, like a mother bear, or like a mama hen where like she would protect you and look out for her team and her crew and like had that fierceness, but was always like so kind, like all the time. I just like really cherish those memories. I've seen her.
This was back in 2000. What was your assignment for that?
2000 and 2001. So for that, for the 2000 tour, I was a sponsor representative for essentially like a giant artist signing area. So when like Ozzy or a band like Incubus or Queens of the Stone Age would do autograph signing sessions, it'd be in this large area that was a conglomerate of New Line Cinema, Hot Topic, FYE, and I think one or two other entities that kind of shared this space, and it was like promoting like their new products or New Line Cinema, their new movies and different things like that. And it played host to when bands would do autograph signing sessions there. The next year I did it for Alternative Press because at that point I'd been writing for them a while and they just signed on to do the official program guides for each stop. And each stop, I mean, you probably know this and your audience does too, but the concerts range from like the smallest one was like 18,000 people to 60,000 people. So they're like big shows. So you had to have like thousands of programs at each stop. And I think there's maybe like 32, 33 shows on each tour. So that was definitely like one of the most crazy stuff I've ever seen. And I was like, it's hard to top, but in 2001, I think it was definitely like feeling the eye of the storm because that was even a quantum leap above that, I think, in terms of reputation, where Slipknot was on it, Marilyn Manson was on it, Hatebreed. It was just that tour was insane.
That's cool, though. You have a great memory of meeting the Osbournes. So you got to meet Ozzy?
Yeah, just like once or twice. And again, it was like, if anything, I would probably demur or just be like, hey, nice to meet you. We'd just try to vanish out of there as quickly as possible because, he's, there's not too many people that, now I feel like there's not of that caliber people that have, like their own security and have, like they're just at that level. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, he'll be missed, man. But I like how this page has the picture of Lemmy and Ozzy next to each other, and I like to think that maybe they're hanging out right now, jamming somewhere.
Oh, God. Yeah, absolutely. That's the thing that makes it go down a little bit smoother.
Stacy Buchanan, the author of Blood of Gods, Metal Mayhem Wine. It's out now. Find it wherever books are sold. And Stacy, where can people find you online? Where can people find out more about the magazine? Anything you want to put out there?
I would say the best, the easiest place to go to, kind of the funnel to find everything you'll need is seek it out on Instagram. It's Blood of Gods Zine. From there, you can find where the book is. You can find how to subscribe. You can find merch, all of that stuff. So just go on Instagram and look for Blood of Gods Zine. And I'm on there and, happy to answer questions, happy to collaborate with people, always looking for like ideas for contributions and editorials and all of it.
Awesome. Stacy, thank you so much for being on the show. Congrats on the book.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
That's it. It's in the books.